The Night Watch, 1642. They called it the Night Watch, but that was never its true name. The painting that now stands as one of Rembrandt's most celebrated masterpieces was, at its birth, a scandal. Imagine this. Amsterdam, 1642. The proud city militia, wealthy merchants turned soldiers, commissioning a group portrait to immortalize their power and prestige. They expected stiff poses, polished armor, an image of order. But Rembrandt van Rijn gave them chaos. He painted not a static portrait but a theatrical eruption of movement, as if time itself had cracked open in the moment of departure. The canvas blazes with energy. Captain Franz Banningcock strides forward, hand outstretched as his lieutenant signals the call. Muskets are raised, drums are struck, children run through the shadows. The militia looks less like a military order and more like a riot about to burst into the streets. When Rembrandt unveiled it, jaws dropped, not in admiration but in shock. This was not the picture of dignity the men had paid for. They wanted to be remembered as heroes of discipline. Instead, Rembrandt revealed them as flawed, human, chaotic, alive. Some men were barely visible in the shadows, while others glowed under golden light. The ones hidden in darkness? Their families never forgave him. Whispers began that Rembrandt had insulted his patrons. But why did he do it? By 1642, Rembrandt was already a master at the height of his fame, yet he carried within him an obsession, to make paintings feel like living theater. He was not interested in vanity. He was interested in truth, the truth of motion, of light, of time as it slips away. Every brushstroke of the Night Watch was an act of rebellion against convention, against stagnation, against the safe portraiture that dominated the Dutch Golden Age. Technically, the work is a marvel. Rembrandt plunges us into chiaroscuro, his signature play of light and shadow, turning the canvas into a stage lit by a single divine spotlight. Look closer and you'll see dust glowing in the air, the texture of fabric, the metallic shimmer of weapons. The little girl in the yellow dress, her face bathed in light, carries a dead chicken at her waist, the claws dangling in eerie symbolism. Some say she represents the militia's emblem. Others whisper she is a ghostly apparition, a symbol of sacrifice, innocence lost to violence. The historical moment matters too. Amsterdam was rich, bursting with trade, and its militia companies were symbols of civic pride. But beneath the surface was tension, competition between factions, unease over war, the fragility of prosperity. In this painting, Rembrandt channeled not just a portrait of men, but a portrait of an age, full of energy, ambition, and underlying chaos. Reception at the time was mixed at best. The patrons were unhappy, and over centuries the canvas itself suffered mutilation, sawn down to fit through a doorway, fragments forever lost. Yet despite the criticism, despite its wounds, the Night Watch endured. By the 19th century the world recognized what those men in 1642 could not, that Rembrandt had created one of the most daring and dynamic paintings in history. Today, when you stand before the Night Watch in Amsterdam's Rijksmuseum, the figures still march toward you as if they might burst out of the frame. You feel the heat of their bodies, the rhythm of their steps, the tension of anticipation. It is not a night watch at all. It is a moment suspended between order and chaos, glory and doom, Rembrandt's eternal reminder that life itself is never still, never neat, never as perfect as we wish to appear. And perhaps that is why the painting lives on. Because in every shadowed face, in every glimmer of light, we see ourselves, not as idealized heroes, but as flawed, restless beings caught in the unstoppable march of time. The Return of the Prodigal Son, 1669. They say that in his final years Rembrandt painted not with brushes, but with his soul. And the Return of the Prodigal Son is the proof. Picture the scene. Amsterdam, 1669. Rembrandt is an old man now. Once, he had been the darling of patrons and the pride of the Dutch Golden Age. But wealth has vanished, fame has crumbled, and tragedy has carved deep shadows into his life. His beloved wife Saskia, gone. His children, lost except for one. Bankruptcy stripped him of dignity, and even his students abandoned him. He is alone, nearly invisible to the world. And yet, in this solitude he turns inward. He seeks not money, not glory, but redemption. He reaches for the Bible, for parables that hold the essence of humanity. And among them, one story pierces him like a dagger, the return of the prodigal son. The canvas begins slowly. Heavy strokes of ochre and crimson bleed into shadow. His figures do not sparkle like jewels as in his youth, they glow from within, lit by something more eternal than sunlight. The kneeling son, head shaved, clothes torn to rags, clings desperately to the father. His face is buried in shame, exhaustion, surrender. You can almost hear the silence of his return, broken only by his own trembling breath. And then, the father. He does not scold. He does not ask where the fortune went. He simply lays his hands on the boy's shoulders, hands roughened with age, hands heavy yet tender, radiating forgiveness. They are painted with such weight, such physical gravity, that you can feel the years of pain being lifted in that single gesture. Behind them shadows loom. A brother stands, stiff and cold, his face carved with judgment. He cannot understand this mercy. Others look on, half-hidden, as though representing society itself, always watching, always doubting, always questioning love that seems too generous, too impossible. But the light belongs to the Father and the Son. It pools around them like liquid gold, swallowing the darkness. This was not simply a biblical parable for Rembrandt. It was his own confession. The wayward son returning was not just the sinner in Scripture. It was Rembrandt himself. A man who had squandered fortune, lost everything, made mistakes, and stood on the threshold of death seeking only one thing: forgiveness. The artistic process was grueling. Unlike the meticulous polish of earlier commissions, here his brush grew almost sculptural, building forms with thick layers, as though carving flesh out of shadow. Every stroke breathed suffering but also peace. He did not paint for approval. He painted for eternity. Historically, the Netherlands of the 1660s was a society obsessed with trade, wealth, and moral order. Rembrandt's ruin made him an outcast in this culture. Yet, rather than bend to their values, he answered with a painting that stripped all wealth, all judgment, all pride away, leaving only the essence of humanity: brokenness, forgiveness, love. Symbolism runs deep. The torn shoes of the son whisper of journeys wasted. The shaved head hints at humility, rebirth. The father's red cloak radiates warmth, shelter, protection. Even the brother's shadowed figure speaks of envy, the human inability to understand unconditional grace. When it was first completed, the painting did not explode into fame. It was too heavy, too intimate, perhaps too personal for a society that preferred portraits of merchants and banquets. It lay quietly, waiting like a buried secret. But centuries later, when eyes grew tired of superficial beauty, the world rediscovered it. Thinkers, priests, writers stood before it and wept. Theologian Henri Nouwen called it the full story of humanity, captured in paint. Today, standing before this towering canvas in the Hermitage Museum, visitors fall silent. Some cry. Others stand for hours, unable to leave. Because this is not merely a painting, it is an encounter. With Rembrandt, with the parable, with ourselves. And in those final strokes, painted by a man at the edge of death, there is a haunting reminder. We are all prodigals. We are all in need of return. And there is, somewhere, a light still waiting for us. Danae. They say every masterpiece has a secret. But Danae is not only wrapped in myth, it is haunted by Rembrandt's own tragedy. The story begins in 1636. Rembrandt, then in his 30s, was at the height of fame. Wealthy patrons filled his studio with commissions, and his wife Saskia had just entered his life like a blaze of light. To immortalize his love, he turned to the myth of Danae, the princess imprisoned by her father, visited by Zeus in the form of golden rain. A myth of divine love breaking through walls. But this was no ordinary Danae. Rembrandt gave her Saskia's face, youthful, radiant, full of life. He poured into the canvas all the passion of their marriage, all the fire of desire, all the tenderness of devotion. Look closely. Danae's body stretches across the bed, luminous and vulnerable, bathed in a golden glow that pours from above. Her hand opens as though to receive the miracle, her lips part in anticipation, her eyes alive with warmth. The silken sheets ripple with sensuality, and yet there is innocence, an intimacy that is not only mythological but deeply personal. The technique was daring. Rembrandt abandoned the rigid coldness of classical nude painting. Instead, he bathed her in light, soft, golden, alive. The flesh glows as if blood flows beneath it. Each brushstroke pulses with movement as though the figure breathes. Critics later called this painting one of the most human nudes in all of art. But life has a way of turning beauty into sorrow. Just 2 years later, Saskia died. Her face, once full of laughter, vanished into memory. And the Danae on Rembrandt's canvas became something else. A ghost, a relic of lost love. The artist returned to the painting years later, reworking it, not with passion but with grief. The features changed subtly. The face grew heavier, older, sadder. Scholars believe he reshaped Saskia into the features of Gertrude Dirks, the woman who cared for him after Saskia's death but later betrayed him, dragging him into lawsuits and ruin. So what we see today is not one woman but two. The brushstrokes are layered like palimpsests of love and betrayal, joy and despair. Danae became a mirror of Rembrandt's life, shifting, scarred, complicated. And tragedy did not end there. In 1985, centuries after Rembrandt's death, a deranged man attacked Danae in the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. He slashed the canvas with a knife and hurled acid upon it, nearly destroying one of the world's treasures. 4 hours, curators fought to save her, washing acid with sponges, sewing torn linen back together. For years the painting lay in restoration, scarred, fragile. And yet she survived. Like Saskia's memory, like Rembrandt's legacy, she endured. Symbolism fills the painting. The golden light represents Zeus, but also hope breaking into confinement. The open palm symbolizes surrender, readiness to receive love. The sheets, rumpled and cascading, speak of passion, of the vulnerability of flesh. And behind her, a servant stands in shadow, perhaps representing society watching, judging. When it first appeared, some critics were shocked. It was too intimate, too real. This was not a goddess carved in marble. It was a woman, flesh and blood, imperfect and yet transcendent. Over time, however, the world recognized its genius. To this day, visitors to the Hermitage whisper in awe before her luminous body, as though entering not just a gallery, but a private chamber of Rembrandt's heart. Danae is not just a myth. It is love immortalized, then broken, then transformed. It carries within its layers Saskia's laughter, Rembrandt's tears, Goethe's betrayal, centuries of survival, even the scars of acid and knives. And when you stand before her glowing figure, you feel it. Love is fragile. Love is wounded. Love is eternal. Self-Portrait, 1659. What do you see when a man paints himself? Not in glory, not in youth, but in ruin. It is 1659. Rembrandt is no longer the golden star of Amsterdam. His wife Saskia is long gone, his beloved Hendrik has died, and his only surviving child, Titus, carries the weight of his father's failures. The great master who once painted princes and merchants now faces bankruptcy, humiliation, and exile from the fashionable elite who once begged for his genius. And in this moment of despair he turns his gaze not outward, but inward. He takes brush and canvas and paints himself as he truly is. Not the handsome prodigy of Leiden. Not the celebrated portraitist of the wealthy guilds. But a man weathered, scarred, defiant. A man staring into the abyss and refusing to look away. Look closely at the portrait. His eyes are the first to strike you, dark pools, heavy-lidded, burning with an intensity that borders on unbearable. They are not eyes that flatter, they are eyes that confess. Around them, the flesh sags, the wrinkles deepen, the shadow of failure lingers. Yet those same eyes radiate power. They say, I am broken, but I am still here. The composition is simple, almost stark. He sits frontally, dressed not in finery but in plain, somber garments. His beret is tilted slightly, his shoulders heavy, his hands relaxed but strong. Behind him, no grand setting, no elaborate props, just darkness swallowing the edges. It is as if the world has collapsed and only he remains, carved out by the light. Technically, this painting is breathtaking. Rembrandt uses his signature mastery of chiaroscuro, light and shadow not as decoration, but as revelation. The face emerges from the gloom, sculpted by layers of ochre, earth tones and glowing flesh. The brushwork is looser now, more fearless. He is not interested in perfection, he is interested in truth. Each stroke carries the weight of confession, of honesty sharpened by suffering. The historical moment adds even more weight. This was painted just a year after Rembrandt declared bankruptcy, forced to sell his house, his collection, even his printing press. The proud artist who once defied the conventions of art now lived modestly, stripped of worldly possessions. Many contemporaries believed his career finished. Yet in this darkness, Rembrandt produced some of the most profound works of his life. Symbolism flows through the canvas. His plain clothes suggest humility, perhaps resignation. Yet his direct, uncompromising gaze suggests defiance. He will not be erased. The shadows that encircle him symbolize death, loss, poverty. But the light on his face, warm and golden, speaks of resilience, of an inner fire that no misfortune could extinguish. When the painting was first seen, it startled many. Patrons expected flattery, elegance, an image of dignity. But this was raw, unpolished, brutally human. And that, perhaps, is why it resonates so strongly today. It is not the mask of an artist, it is the soul. Critics now see this self-portrait as one of the pinnacles of Rembrandt's genius. Because here he transforms suffering into art. He turns failure into dignity. He dares to show that beauty does not lie in perfection but in honesty. Few artists before him, and perhaps none since, have painted themselves with such naked truth. Stand before this painting and you feel it. The silence grows heavy. His eyes pierce through time, through centuries, through the fragile barriers of your own defenses. It is as though he whispers, "One day you too will face the shadows. Will you hide? Or will you meet them as I do, with open eyes?" In this portrait, Rembrandt is no longer just a painter. He becomes a mirror. A reminder that every human being carries scars, losses, failures. And yet, within those ruins there is still light. And so, the man who had lost everything painted himself, and gave the world a treasure no gold could ever buy. Portrait of a man with a golden helmet. In the hushed corridors of the Berlin Gemäldegalerie Gallery, a figure sits silently under a shaft of dim light, and for centuries, viewers have been drawn into his gaze. The man wears a golden helmet, its polished surface catching even the slightest glimmer, as if it holds the whispers of 1,000 battles. This is not merely a portrait, it is a doorway into the mysteries of time, mortality, and artistic genius. And yet, almost immediately questions arise. Who is he? Was this truly painted by the master Rembrandt, or is it a phantom of imagination, a shadow cast by fame and expectation? The story begins in the twilight of Rembrandt's life. The artist, now older, weighed down by personal loss and financial ruin, sought meaning in the faces he painted. Each brushstroke was not just color on canvas, but a reflection of his own struggle, the tension between light and shadow, hope and despair, glory and ruin. The golden helmet, gleaming yet heavy, becomes a symbol, not of triumph but of the burdens that come with human ambition. Rembrandt painted not just a soldier, but a soul suspended in the delicate balance between earthly power and inevitable decay. Creating this painting was no simple task. Rembrandt's brush moved with both precision and abandon, layering deep umbers and burnt siennas beneath the luminous gold. He captured the intricate reflections of light across the metal, the subtle shadows that fall across the man's furrowed brow, and the almost imperceptible tension in his hands. Every stroke conveys emotion, pride tempered by vulnerability, strength shadowed by the fragility of mortality. The texture of the paint itself seems to vibrate with life, giving the helmet a presence so real that one half expects it to weigh upon the viewer as much as it does the sitter. Historically, this period in the Dutch Golden Age was tumultuous. Cities buzzed with commerce and political intrigue, yet the artist himself was grappling with bankruptcy, personal loss, and the fading admiration of society. In the midst of these external pressures, the golden helmet emerges as a metaphor for the tension between worldly achievement and internal reflection. Perhaps it is a commentary on the futility of glory, or a meditation on the fleeting nature of fame. Some even argue that the ambiguous expression of the sitter reflects Rembrandt's own disillusionment with life's certainties. But the intrigue of this portrait extends beyond the painter's lifetime. Scholars in the 20th century began to debate its authorship, questioning whether the hand that created it was truly Rembrandt's or that of a talented student. Scientific analysis and stylistic comparisons could not provide definitive answers. And therein lies the enduring power of the work. It thrives on uncertainty. Every viewer must confront their own need for truth, their own desire to discern reality from illusion, just as the golden helmet forces a confrontation between appearance and essence. Symbolically, the painting resonates on multiple levels. The gold represents not just wealth or status, but the radiant, sometimes blinding allure of human ambition. The shadowed face beneath the helmet suggests the hidden costs of such aspirations. The solitude, the vulnerability, the inevitability of decline. The ambiguity of the sitter's identity allows us to project ourselves into the narrative, imagining our own reflections, fears, and desires mirrored in the polished metal. In this way, the painting becomes less a historical artifact and more a mirror to the human soul, timeless in its ability to evoke introspection and wonder. Reception of the work has been as layered as its paint. Some have praised it as a pinnacle of Rembrandt's late style, a masterful study of light, shadow, and psychological depth. Others have questioned its origin, relegating it to a secondary place in the artist's oeuvre. Yet, regardless of attribution, the portrait continues to captivate, haunting viewers with its enigmatic presence. Museums, collectors, and scholars all acknowledge that it possesses a gravity beyond mere artistry, a quiet magnetism that defies explanation. As one steps back from the canvas, the golden helmet gleams once more, catching the light in fleeting sparks. The figure's eyes, partially obscured yet profoundly expressive, seem to follow the observer, inviting them to ponder courage and fear, power and fragility, the known and the unknowable. It is a work that lingers in the mind long after one has left the room, a testament to Rembrandt, or the genius who channeled his spirit, that even in uncertainty, art can achieve immortality. And so, the man with the golden helmet sits eternally poised between reality and legend, a silent witness to history and to the unending dialogue between artist and viewer. In his stillness, we find a reflection of ourselves, our ambitions, our doubts, and the eternal quest to find meaning beneath the sheen of gold.